What do you think of the degree of Christian support for Israel in tourism?
Oh, wow. I think it's amazing that Christians will come to Israel in good times and in rough times. I think that support is amazing. It's really encouraging and heartwarming, actually, to see Christian groups coming even during times we've had intifada, we've had mini wars. Now we're having this big war, and the Christian groups are coming, and they are, and they're if they can get flights, and they can come over. They're shopping, they're seeing the sights, they're keeping the economy strong, and we're very grateful.
What does your wife do?
She's a tour guide.
Private tour guide?
Yes.
But she's licensed by the...
Oh yeah, she's licensed. My wife is a licensed tour guide in Israel, and she tours. She guides all sorts of groups. She actually just guided a man and his granddaughter just the other day, Christian couple, and it was really, really amazing. They had a really great time.
What do you think of North American Jews or Europeans who think that they should be dictating what Israel should be doing with land and in politics, for instance, in this time of war?
Right. On the one hand, they have a say in the matter because Israel is one of the main pillars of the Jewish people, whether you live in Israel or not. And so I think they have a say in what's going on because it's part of their identity, even though they don't live in Israel. On security issues, it gets a little more complicated. I think you need to have skin in the game. For example, both my sons served in the Israeli Defense Forces. And there's something very, very, you really invest when your own children put on a uniform and put themselves in harm's way in order to defend Israel. The way you make decisions about the security of Israel is very, very different when you know that it's either existential or certainly from a security perspective. And for that, I really think security decisions really need to be made by people who live in Israel only.
And the area that you live in, is it Judea or Samaria?
I live in Judea.
What holy sites are around you?
Jerusalem is just to the north of us. We can see Jerusalem from our house, so that's pretty awesome. Other holy sites, I guess Hebron is south of us. I can't see Hebron, but we can drive there. I can be there in about 15 minutes drive, which is not too hard.
Who's buried in Hebron?
Our patriarchs and our matriarchs, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and Sarah, and Rivka, and Leah. And so it's the burial place of our grandparents and grandfathers and grandmothers.
Is it the second holiest place in Judaism?
Oh.
So Yishai Fleischer told me.
I like to think of it as I'll quote Yishai Fleischer. It is our Mount Rushmore of the Jewish people. It is the pilgrimage site, if you will, for the founding fathers and mothers of the Jewish people. That's Yishai Fleischer.
You mentioned that Israel is one of the pillars of Judaism. Conversely, would anti-Israelism be against Judaism?
Definitely.
In what way?
Look, if supporting Israel, if Israel is one of the pillars of Jewish identity, and you don't support Israel, it kind of means, in a sense, that you are, that you're taking a shot at your own identity. That means that it can be very, at the very least, it's self-hating, and the very worst, it's dangerous. In other words, to have Jews who are not just critical. To be critical against Israel, that's perfectly fine. When you say, you know what, I have a different opinion, I have a different way of looking at things, because in Israel there's a pluralism of different opinions. That's what makes for a vibrant democracy. Absolutely fantastic. But when you're really against Israel, and we've seen this before, when you're really taking shots at Israel, when you're really, it's not about being critical, when you're hateful against Israel and you're a Jew, so I think that's pretty terrible.
In what way is Israel intrinsic to Judaism? In other words, and by that I mean Zionism. Are there commandments to observe the Jewish laws, Jewish rules in the Holy Land specifically?
Yes. So, a Jew talks about Israel and about Jerusalem throughout the day through prayers and through blessings. It's constantly in our thoughts and in our minds. At a wedding, for example, at a Jewish wedding, under the chuppah, the breaking of the glass, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with, is all about remembering the destruction of the temple and the hope for the third temple to be built. And I think that the fact that it's constantly in our minds, constantly on our lips, constantly in our prayers, means that Jerusalem and Israel are central. Zionism, we talk about the idea of Shuva L'Tzion Barachamim, to return to Zion with compassion, is key to who we are. And to cut that out of our Jewish identity is like cutting out a third of our body and saying that we're whole. We're not.
Well, you mentioned for a Jew to try and deny Israel is anti-Jewish, but what about those who are criticizing and use Neturei Karta or the Satmars, who claim that, well, Israel is not technically a legitimate state because the Mashiach has not yet come, or even enemies of Israel who are criticizing Israel for their conduct. Is criticism of Israel necessarily, of course, when they say, well, Israel is illegitimate or should be eradicated? But what's your position on this?
So again, there's criticism, as in to be a critic of Israeli policy, and then there's denying Israel's right to exist. When you're talking about that in Neturei Karta, for example, and for example, we see a lot of Jews here in the United States who are being pro-Hamas, for example. So I think that they've cut out a big chunk of their Jewish identity. I think that they're enemies of Israel, and they're actually enemies of the Jewish people. I think it's very, very plain.
How about the new American White House policy to promote cutting Israel up to create a jihadist, Islamist Palestinian state?
I'm not familiar with that so much.
Well, the notion of a Palestinian state in Judea, Samaria, and Gaza.
Oh, regarding a Palestinian state. Look, at the present time, there's no way we're ready for a Palestinian state. There's no real leadership on their part. There's no one to talk to. There's no will from the Palestinian people, I don't believe, right now, to live in forget peace. How about not violence?
Non-belligerence?
Right, and I think
non-belligerence?
Right, and I think that right now we're not ready for that. So to talk about, and I'm not alone in this. I mean, all of our political leaders in Israel across the political spectrum agree that this is not the time to be talking about or thinking about a Palestinian state. It's not part of reality. We need to deal with other things right now. First and foremost, the security of Israel, and we're simply there's no address to turn to at this point in time.
Let's talk about expertise and credentials. When we talked about when we discuss Israel as a part of Judaism, are you not just as an observant Jew, but how knowledgeable are you about halacha and Talmud?
I try my best. I spend a lot of time studying halacha, teaching halacha, Jewish law, and it seems very, very clear. This is not a tradition that was founded in May of 1948, the establishment of Israel. The idea of having a connection to Israel is something that has been part of Jewish identity since the very, very beginning. You can go back even as far as Abraham and the idea of even moving to the land of Israel and picking up from where he left off. Lech lecha ma'artzecha mamoladecha mibeit avicha el haaretz asher areka. Go and get up and leave the land where you were born, from your father's house, and go to the land where I will show you. So clearly land, physical space, physical place, which is Israel, is a critical part of the mapping of our people. If it started with Abraham, it continues all the way through. The very fact that King David is the king in Israel, not in Bermuda, okay, and so it goes. And yes, it takes us into the modern age. Zionism really truly is about the manifestation of prophecy, of what the Bible has been talking about, what our prophets have been talking about. When Jeremiah talks about Od Yishama Ba'arei Yehuda, Kol Sason V'Kol Simcha Kol Chatan V'Kol Kala, when Jeremiah, looking at the destruction of Jerusalem, can you imagine? He's looking 2,500 years ago at a burning, broken city, massacres, and he says, Od Yishama, we will one day hear in the hills of Judea, right? Yehuda, Kol Sason Kol Simcha, the sound of happiness of the bride and the groom, Kol Chatan V'Kol Kala. And I think that that's what we're experiencing and have the incredible. It's almost, I would even say that somebody who is not supportive of Israel, and again, I'm not talking about the critical side, but doesn't believe in the existence of Israel, is literally giving the finger to Jeremiah, is literally saying to Jeremiah, you're a liar. And someone like that, their Jewish identity, I think, needs to be called into question.
Well, what do you think about Christians who may come to you to try and delegitimize, almost like a disputation? There was a fellow who you were speaking with, and he thought he was going to convert you, and you showed him a little something, and I came back, and he was humbled. How often does this happen, and do you think it puts people off, or what's the effect of this idea that the Christians will convert Jews?
I don't think it's possible for anybody to really convert anybody else. I think that if a person wants to convert, then that's their prerogative. That's coming from their own heart. They're obviously wrestling with something. Something is not sitting right with them, and they want to make a change. I don't think anybody can actually convert anybody, and certainly nobody can convert me. And so I come into these conversations with an open heart and an open mind, and I'll, if it's respectful, which it was, and it is, then we're in a good place, and we can have a open conversation. If he feels humbled, it's only because I was being honest with him and respectful, and he was being honest and respectful with me. So we're both in a good place.
How do you feel about Christians to support Israel now in her time of need, not just in terms of bomb shelters, of course that's important, and security fences and ambulances and things like this, but also sociopolitically in this time that throughout the Western world, the EU, North America, that Israel is under siege politically. And it seems like the Jews are being isolated because of the operation to push Hamas back.
So if the question has to do is, do they have a voice in that whole discussion? Again, I think that there's space for that kind of dialogue. I think that there's, if Israel is important to them, to that person, then they should be able to engage in that conversation and have an opinion. When it comes again to security issues, I'm going to, again, like I said before, only people who are living in Israel should really be making or be part of decision-making processes when it comes to security. But I think that if Israel is an important part of your life, whether you're Jewish or Christian or Muslim or whatever, then yeah, be part of the conversation. Absolutely. Be invested. Be knowledgeable. Do your research. And be part of the conversation up to the point of making decisions that have to do with our actual security and defense.
What does a sofer do?
Oh, so a sofer is a Torah scribe and is responsible for accurately, carefully transcribing God's word from the Torah, either in the Torah, mezuzah, tefillin, scroll of Esther, or any sacred writings accurately, respectfully, with humility, I hope, and making sure that a very holy product is produced.
Do you do that?
Yeah, I do that. I'm a Torah scribe.
When they say a Torah scribe, what happens if, and you're essentially doing calligraphy?
It's more than calligraphy, because at the end of the day, you have to have a nice print and writing and everything, but more importantly is you have to make sure that the Hebrew letter, because we write in Hebrew, that the Hebrew letter is identifiable as that letter. And calligraphy sometimes, you ever seen something like on a fancy wedding invitation, and you read it and you go, I think that means dear. Dear guest. But I don't know if that E really looks like an E because they made it so fancy. You can't have that as a Torah scribe. You can't go that fancy. If you go that fancy, you're a calligrapher, not a Torah scribe. You got to make sure that the Hebrew letter looks like the Hebrew letter so that there's no question whatsoever that you have transmitted accurately the sacred scrolls that were given to us by God.
So if people wanted to have custom-made mezuzah scrolls, for instance, done, how might they reach you?
Okay, so I don't do custom-made mezuzah scrolls. My focus primarily is on the repair and restoration of old Torah scrolls and bringing them back to use. Many of them have been in disuse or got damaged, either from natural reasons, for example, moisture or neglect or cracking and things like that. I was involved in the rescue of a couple of Torah scrolls that were buried in a cemetery in Germany during Kristallnacht, Night of Broken Glass, and were brought to my studio, literally still caked with the earth from the grave, and were able to, in one case, be able to salvage and rescue that Torah scroll. In the other case, it was not possible. So really my focus is on restoration of Torah scrolls. I've written, scrolls of Esther, mezuzahs, things like that. But I certainly recommend anybody who wants a nice mezuzah they can certainly trust go to a trustworthy local, or even order it online from Israel, from a trustworthy Judaica store.
But do you specialize in hard to restore Torahs?
I'd like to bring these things back to life. I think I want to give them another chance if I can.
What's the oldest Torah you've restored?
That was 500 years old.
Where was that from?
That was one of the ones from Germany, and it was
the Middle Ages.
Yeah, it was written on deerskin, so it's very thin, very light, and it was a beautiful piece of work. And it was a really honor to be connected with something 500 years old. Give it another, couple hundred years of use. Pretty cool.
But for antiquities and archaeological findings that are discovered in Israel, has anything ever been found that validated the claim of Palestinian indigeneity in the land of Israel as a Palestinian political sovereign?
Not that I'm aware of. Anything that we find in terms of archaeology shows, the strata of people who lived in Israel over the centuries. The Palestinian concept is a rather modern idea. So we haven't really found anything archaeologically. We found a lot of things from Second Temple period, even going back to First Temple period. But the concept of Palestinian roots in Israel really doesn't go back that far, actually.
But when Palestinians claim to be descendants of the Canaanites, the original Canaanites, has that been substantiated through DNA or science?
Oh, I think it's pretty much been substantiated that that's not the case.
That they came from elsewhere? The people who call themselves they were just residents in the Ottoman Empire at that time.
Sure, and they may have come from Saudi Arabia, what was now called Saudi Arabia, places like that. As far as I understand, they may have been here, but most of the ones who are here in Israel today are probably have moved to Israel only in the last, anything from the last century, perhaps, at the most. That's my understanding.
Did they move when the Jews came back to essentially cultivate the land?
There were Arabs there for sure. So they were there, and but you have to remember that also the population was rather small, and but I don't think going back to Canaanite times, I don't think there's any evidence for that whatsoever.
Which website can people find to support your causes?
So they can go to operationlifeshield.org, operationlifeshield.org. We're also on Facebook and Instagram, and come on over and see what we're doing. We'd love to, certainly welcome anybody who would like to be part of protecting lives in Israel.